Hello and welcome to Yarra Library's Kids Creative Club. I'm Andrew from Richmond Library and I'll be taking you through a fun little activity today. Yarra Libraries wishes to acknowledge that this recording was made on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri and the Woiwurrung, pays tribute to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in Yarra, and gives respect to elders past, present and emerging. Today we're going to be making what's called a God's Eye, which is a small hanging piece of craft that you can make pretty simply at home yourselves. Not much supervision is needed for this one. But it can be a little bit tricky for little fingers. So I'll take you through the basic steps of it today. All you're going to need is 2 sticks, and those can be any kind of sticks. We've got pop sticks today, but they could be some chopsticks or some dowel or even some nice straight sticks that you find outside yourselves. We'll also need 1 pair of scissors and some wool or fibre or anything that's long and colourful that you would like to wind around here. Some natural fibres can get a little flaky, but today we're just going to be using a bit of acrylic wool because the colour's so nice. So the way to get started with one of these is to make a little platform upon which it's going to be based. So if we get our sticks and we pop them one on top of the other like that, we can grab the end of our piece of wool and we'll make just a little knot, not too tight, around those sticks. Now the reason you don't want it to be too tight is so that you can still move it, and so that when we do the next step, which is to make a little cross with it, it's not all set in place just yet. So we're roughly halfway there, and we'll do our first little crossover. So what we'll do is just do a little bit of a wrap around, 1, 2, and then do a quarter turn, and go again, 1, 2. It's a good time if you've got a little bit of a dangly part that you can hold it over, and do another wrap, 1, 2. I'm looking at that thinking maybe 3. Then we'll do another quarter turn and go again. You sort of just build that up until the middle's nice and covered. And as you see on the other side, it's starting to come nicely covered up. Now at this point, if you like, you can snip it off, just so that it's a little out of the way and easier to take care of. So then we cover it over. Now that our middle part's getting pretty covered, we're looking pretty good to keep going. So from here, you might like to just do a little bit of a shift just to make sure it's all looking pretty centered. And it's looking pretty good. So now we'll start working around the outside, building up our little God's Eye. So we're going to go 1 over and turn. 1 over and turn. 1 over, turn. And we just keep going like that, building up the layers. So as we're going along, you might see little gaps starting to form in between our thread, and you just give them a little bit of a push down so that they're neat. They don't have to be super close to each other, but that might be the look you're going for. So turn and turn. So as you'll see on the other side, we're starting to build up our layers around the middle. So this is one way of doing it. as you can see, it's starting to form up a really nice little triangular pattern there. If you want them to be more regular, you wouldn't push them down as much. Pushing them down creates a little bit of a bunched up effect. So if you're not liking the look of that, you can spread it back out. But it all just depends on how you want it to look. And if you're not too bothered with it looking completely even, sometimes that little bit of disruption can look really nice. So if at a certain point you decide that you want it to have multiple colours, now's a great time to do some tying off and moving on with the next bit. So to change colours, all you have to do is just knot it once, just a really little one. So give it a snip. And just give that a little bit of a loop so it doesn't come undone while you tie on the next piece of fabric or of wool. So we find ourselves, and this might be the tricky part, we need somebody's help. There we go. And remember, when you snip it off, leave yourself plenty of wool to work with, because you can always retie the knot. But if you've snipped it off down here, it's really, really difficult to tie on the next piece. So get these together. Now the knot that I've found that works best is to sort of match up the two ends together like this. Give it a little bit of a twist to make it easier to thread through itself. Do a little bit of a loop and pull it up through. Now my acrylic wool is a little slippery, so if you have to give it a couple goes, don't worry. So there we go, nice and through. Give that a bit of a pull, and then you pull the two separate bits of rope nice and tight. From there, you can give it a little trim. And if any of that's going to be a bit too tricky for you, do get an adult to help. So we've got our little one here. I can see that's the direction we need to go. So we'll loop that under. Now it can be difficult to make sure that you keep this join hidden. So if you need any help with that at all, just seek an adult's help. But as you move along, there'll be a little chance to tuck it in under. So we'll just keep going. So I've been doing an under stitch, which creates a tighter looking wind. It might not be the look you're looking for, but you can play around with it and just experiment to see how you want it to come out yourself. So here's that part we were talking about, getting that knot underneath, just making sure when you do your wrap that it gets tucked under and doesn't stick out in between. If you're doing lots of different multiple colours, that's something to really keep an eye for, so that as you work that one around, you're making sure all of the knot stays nicely tucked away, so that one side's really neat and the other side's got the knots showing, because it's still nice to see that work on that side too. So we'll just do a couple more wraps. Turning over and having a look, you can see we've got our little knot poking through there. And just try and work that back around a bit more. Tuck it in. And you'll see there's still plenty of play with those. So there you go. So depending on how many layers and how you quite want it to look, you might like to keep going with more and more colours around and around and around. And you can do different kinds of stitches over and under to achieve different effects. So one of the ones that I did before was a bit like this one. So you can see I've gone under and done a wrap underneath and then done a wrap over and continued that around to create two sides where you can sort of see the binding part and the covered part. And so that brings up some nice little different ways of doing it as well. So as you keep going around and around, you'll get to a point where you're going to tie it off. And again, when we're doing it for our last one so that we can hang, make sure it's nice and long so you've got plenty to work with. And just do a simple knot there. And a second one never hurts when you're finishing up. And that gives you your lovely hanging, what's called a God's eye. So if you keep your twists nice and tight, and as you get further and further out, you'll see the sort of results you might be looking for. So there's that one. You can experiment with all different kinds of over and under wraps, as we saw on this one. And you can also start weaving across the weft. So if you wanted to draw some lines in, you could duck and weave your wool in and under itself and create little patterns. You might even like to put beads on it. As you start doing one wrap, you might like to feed a bead through it. If you're going to do that, you'd probably want to put your wool on a hook. If you're going to do that, you'd probably want to put your wool on a needle so that you can thread it through the beads nice and easy. But yeah, looking forward to see what sort of things you come up with, and I hope to see them shared to the Yarra Library's Facebook page. So thanks for joining me for Kids Creative Club this week, and see you next time. Bye.